Good evening, everyone. Hello, hello. We're so glad to have you here. Welcome to this wonderful virtual event. My name is Brittany Schock. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Solutions and Engagement Editor at Source Media Properties. That includes Richland Source, Ashland Source, and Knox Pages. And I want to thank everyone for being here today to learn all about investing American Rescue Plan dollars back into our communities. First, I want to introduce our esteemed panelists for tonight. So first we have Jay Allred. He's the publisher and president of Source Media Properties. Jay. We have Brody Groves, who's the president of the Richland County Foundation. We have Brody Perry, who's the president and CEO of the Richland Area Chamber and Economic Development. And I want to give a special welcome to our very special guest. We have Alison Goebel. She is the executive director of the Greater Ohio Policy Center. We're going to have a great discussion tonight. First, I want to go over a few housekeeping rules. You guys will all see the chat box on the right side of your screen. This is where the majority of you are going to have your discussions tonight. I would ask that we all keep it civil, keep it open-minded, and that's where you're going to be able to ask any questions as we go along the presentation. So any questions that you might have for Allison or any of our panelists, please put them in the chat box. You can also use the Ask a Question button that's on the bottom of your screen. I would also point you to the polls button because we're going to have a couple polls that will go up live that you'll be able to answer. And all in all, this is going to be really engaging, very informative, and we're all looking forward to it. So I'm going to hand it off to Brody, and he's going to give us, along with the rest of us, a little welcome and some more context as to why we're here tonight. So take it away, Brody.
Very good. Thanks so much, Brittany. And first of all, on behalf of Jody and Jay and Allison and myself, we can't thank you enough for joining this event. I don't think it's an overstatement to say this is a generational opportunity, not only for the country, but for Richland County with these funds coming through the American Rescue Plan Act. Richland County is slated to get nearly $50 million. $23.5 million for the county commissioners in Richland County, $22 million for the city of Mansfield, with additional money going to other cities, villages, and townships. This is a plan that could potentially change lives, and that's what the American Recovery Act is supposed to be. We've been through the COVID. It's time to rejuvenate cities and counties and government and people's lives, and we think a conversation like this tonight is important. Part of our role at the Community Foundation not only is being a grant maker, but convening and curating these types of conversations, and I couldn't be more excited to have these three folks with us. We've really taken a page out of the Mansfield Rising playbook. Less the trip to Austin, Texas. This is really the model that we used in putting that successful program together. Allison and the Greater Ohio Policy Center consulted on that project. We think we can use that same model and address situations and get a lot of good input tonight. So to the residents of Richland County, the 122 people that have joined us tonight, thanks so much.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Brody Perry. As Brittany said, I'm the president and CEO of the Richland Area Chamber and Economic Development. Our organization, for those who maybe don't know, represents nearly 1,000 businesses here in Richland County, and they employ over 30,000 employees. We, as many of you know, have been on the front lines helping our members respond to the pandemic and remain strong over the last 15 months. It's been an up and down 15 months. Everyone always asks how our business is doing, and it really depends on the businesses. We've seen some businesses expanding their operations, believe it or not, in the last year. And then, of course, we know that many businesses have struggled with all of the related impacts from the pandemic. Our mission at the Chamber is to help existing businesses succeed and attracting new businesses into our community. We know that successful businesses mean quality jobs means quality places. And quality places help retain and attract new businesses. So it really is kind of a synergy there. And we were interested in co-hosting today's conversation because so many of our members are potential recipients and beneficiaries of what the programs that will happen, and ultimately having a healthy community is best for all of us. Our goal tonight is to help provide to our local government officials and the community as they try to figure out how to handle these Arpa funds and funding requests that are top of mind in many civic conversations right now. I know it's been a topic of conversation all over town. To do this, we're going to hear from our Legacy City expert, the Greater Ohio Policy Center, on ways that legacy cities and communities like Mansfield, Richland County, and the other communities in Richland County can take advantage of every cent that has been granted to them. We know that so much has been asked of our elected officials over the last 15 months and truly of all the leaders here in the community. Our leaders have been overstretched, no doubt about that. But we believe our local Arpa dollars can unlock tremendous potential in the community, just like Brady said. To help lighten the load that the Arpa funds may create, we invited Gopc to provide inspiration, give perspectives on what other communities are doing with their funds, something we love to look at here at the Chamber, our best practices, and then offer some guiding principles that we hope will make it easier for you to feel confident to strategically deploy these dollars. Now I want to hand it over to Jay.
That's right, Jody. Everybody, my name is Jay Allred. I'm the president of Source Media Properties and the publisher of Richland Source, Ashland Source, and Knox Pages, covering 3 counties. When we published that editorial back in March on all 3 of our platforms, one of the things we knew was that Richland County and the communities that we cover, their commissioners, mayors, and council members want to do right by the communities they serve. And we also know that the residents of those communities are passionate and have a lot of pride. As a result, they have great ideas and opinions and perspectives that want to be heard as our elected officials consider how to deploy Arpa funds. And so from our angle, we were just really happy to be able to offer the Sources platform to host this conversation and make it accessible to residents, concerned citizens, leaders in the nonprofit community who may not be able to attend a city council or county commissioner meeting. Transparent government and transparency is a good thing. It makes for good communities, and we just really believe that. We also know that our local elected officials did not sign up to manage a $50 million generational windfall. When y'all ran for office, this was not in your mindset. And I think moreover, and even more significantly, no one could have anticipated the gravity of this particular funding. When you really think about it, this money only exists because of a crushing pandemic that destroyed lives, families, organizations, and businesses. There's a real responsibility to honor those sacrifices in the decisions that we make in how these dollars get invested. So from our perspective, we want to help our local policy members access the wisdom and expertise to make the best possible decisions on behalf of their communities, which suffered greatly over the last 15 months. We won't tell you exactly how to spend the money. Instead, the goal here is to work to create some space to think about and clarify possible parameters for the important decisions that lie ahead. And so now, turning to our speaker tonight, I'm really excited to introduce you all to Alison Goebel, the Executive Director of Gopc. Allison actually lived in Mansfield in the early 2000s. And has been with Gopc since 2010. I'll let her take it from here to more fully introduce Gopc and get to the heart of tonight's discussion, after which we'll leave plenty of time for your questions and conversation. Allison, we're leaving it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jay, Jody, Brady. Thanks so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, but I do want to thank all of the mayors and county commissioners and the city council people who are here. I know that you have a lot on your plates, and so I appreciate you taking the time today. And also all the residents and other leaders who are present as well. So I'm going to just start by really briefly introducing who I am and my organization, just to kind of help orient you if you haven't met us before. So we are a statewide nonprofit that does research and advocacy in service of helping communities around the state revitalize. And so while we're based in Columbus, that's really to access the State House and the state administration. The majority of our work actually happens outside of Central Ohio in places like Springfield, Toledo, Cleveland, Mansfield. And so I'm really happy to be here tonight because I love working in legacy cities, which is what we would call Mansfield and legacy communities, which I think Richland County is also one of. So we know that communities across the state have been doing an admirable job trying to get through the pandemic, right? We know that, unfortunately, though, a lot of the pre-pandemic revitalization momentum that was underway got slowed. We also know that some of the pressing community concerns that existed before the pandemic, whether that was housing insecurity or food insecurity, right? Those issues have become more urgent. And so tonight I want to talk about how communities are planning their ARPA dollars in light of so many of these competing needs, and with the knowledge that the regulations in the dollars have some flexibility on some issues, and acknowledging that there's some prescriptions and kind of limitations on other issues. I will say, if there is one takeaway that I want to offer tonight, it is to be as strategic as possible with the dollars. And what I mean by that is that investments need to be working together towards community goals rather than being sort of a piecemeal scattered shot collection of projects or programs. And so achieving that means understanding community goals and developing and implementing a plan with specific projects that are working together towards these very clearly defined priorities. So within the lens of being strategic, I want to suggest two categories to think about grouping projects into. So stabilization and investing in the future. And because the ARPA dollars are going to be dispersed in two separate allocations, Mansfield has probably already gotten their money, or soon to be. Everyone else is sort of waiting. But then another round is going to be coming out next year. You all have to just encumber that money by the end of 2024 and then have it spent by 2026. So there is some time to achieve both of these objectives of stabilizing communities and investing in the future. So I will say that we have been advising communities around these dollars to kind of slow down, think about the money really in the investing in the future bucket. But I do want to talk right now just about the stabilization piece, because that is going to lay the foundation for all the work that you will be doing in the future. So let's talk about stabilizing. What I mean is that, first of all, think about reimbursing yourself for unexpected costs or revenue shifting that you as a local government may have had to do in light of and in response to the pandemic. So Canton and Cleveland have already gone on record, those cities' governments have already gone on record saying that they plan to use some of their ARPA dollars to repay their rainy day funds. That seems like a very reasonable use of these dollars. And one that you may want to consider if you all had to shift around revenues. Stabilization also means keeping residents and local governments from becoming vulnerable again. And so we are suggesting to communities, and I'm going to suggest to you all tonight, to think about maybe retaining 10, 15, 20% of your ARPA dollars to priorities that feel very urgent today, that you are going to need to use to stabilize the community. So an immediate priority that you might think about is to continue the small business grant program. Austin, Texas is already planning to do this. I expect Columbus is going to use some of their ARPA dollars to continue their small business grants and low interest loans. So that's something you may want to consider. Another immediate priority may be landlord and tenant assistance, right? So that landlords can continue to maintain their properties, pay their property taxes, and that tenants can remain housed. This is definitely a priority in Springfield, Ohio, and I'm going to talk about them a lot because there's a lot of similarities between you all and Springfield in terms of side of demographics and size and profile. What we heard from some other legacy cities last week in a meeting that we held statewide, some other smaller legacy cities are going to be prioritizing some very key roadway projects that they feel are going to be important, first for the quality of life for existing residents, but also to really serve as a springboard for future economic development opportunities as these communities start to recover. So again, I just want to sort of emphasize, think about what are these early projects or programs that you need today to help with the stabilization. Don't necessarily spend all your money on that, right? But don't also hold back dollars, because this is going to be really important to get this right. It would be great if you could go ahead and drop into the chat what you think some immediate priorities are for Mansfield or Richland County. And if you can specify the geography, that would be helpful, just because the dollars are coming separately. And I will say, because of my screen share, I can't actually read the chat right now, but as soon as I turn off my screen share, which will be, in the next 10 or 15 minutes, I do look forward to reading those comments. And for the electeds here, I just want to say, these are not binding. We are not expecting you to take this as a list of things to do. This is really about an opportunity to get a sense of where your neighbors' heads are, to get a sense, to really kind of take a temperature check of the room. But again, these are not binding, so I'm not giving you an assignment quite yet. All right, so let's talk about investing in the future. So by investment, what I mean is that it's time to move on those projects and programs and initiatives that can have a lasting impact in the community, but maybe you just haven't had the funds to implement yet. And the bulk of your ARPA dollars should be serving these objectives. So to decide what investments to make, think about the community priorities that have been hopefully percolating in local conversations, or even better, have already started to gain some momentum and started moving. So these priorities are going to drive strategic decision-making around the dollars, and ideally other dollars within your control and elsewhere in the community. So when evaluating potential programs or projects, ask whether these, this particular investment, this capital improvement, this program, if it's going to be in service of getting the community faster to achieving a community goal or program. Priority or goal. So let me give you an example of what I mean about being strategic, using tactics, programs, initiatives to build on each other. So maybe there's been an ongoing conversation that that county leaders want to increase the pool of capable workers graduating from area high schools who will stay in Richland County. So, this has been an ongoing, clear community priority. Sure, you want to think about the salaries and bonuses that are going to help you attract and retain high quality teachers. You want to make sure kids have laptops, which I think all your kids do, right? But kids also need full bellies. They need air-conditioned buildings to live in, to learn in. They internet internet when they're not at school. They may need mentors, right? To keep graduating seniors in Richland County, you may need to think about increasing the number of quality apartments affordable to young graduates who are entering the advanced manufacturing and healthcare fields, which are the largest industries in the county, right? So these investments are all in service of building towards the same goal, keeping more graduating seniors who are ready to stay in Richland County and working in advanced manufacturing and healthcare. And the great thing about these education-focused investments is they're going to bring benefits to others in the community, right? In the form of shared hotspots or expanded broadband access, cooling stations in schools, new housing. But still, at the end of the day, the goal is really about keeping graduating seniors in the county who can fulfill open jobs. I will say the other reason to start to identify community priorities and ideally build consensus around them is that it makes it easier to say no to proposals that are not in line with that priority. So I can only imagine how many pitches our local government officials today have already received from lots of different folks, right? And a lot of different proposals are probably really good ones. But if they are not in line directly with that community priority, that may be a project or an initiative that needs to be prioritized or deferred. Not because it's a bad idea, it's probably a really good idea, but is it in service of achieving a clear community priority? So examples that we are seeing from around the state that we expect ARPA money to go to. So Springfield, Ohio, I mentioned their affordable housing concerns. They want to use their ARPA dollars to grow the stock of affordable and safe affordable housing in their city. Sandusky, your neighbors to the north, they want to build out their non-Cedar Point tourism industry with a priority to supporting local restaurants and entertainment venues. We expect other cities around the state to prioritize minority health outcomes with an special focus on reducing infant mortality among Black and Hispanic families. That's a longstanding priority here in Columbus, and we expect ARPA dollars to go to continue furthering that ongoing community priority. I will say that there is a lot of money coming in. It is not endless. Unfortunately, there are not trees of money, and so we recommend focusing on just 2, maybe 3 community priorities. Go ahead and drop in the chat what community priorities have been percolating in Mansfield and the balance of the county, and what priorities you think should be pursued with the ARPA dollars. And again, right now, you may just want to segment what is the community priority that you think the ARPA dollars need to be in service of, and that there may be other community priorities that are certainly high priority that just may not be a great fit for ARPA because the regulations around this really are about recovering from COVID and not maybe other priorities. That said, I will say some of the most savvy legacy cities that we see will say this is our community priority and we're going to just kind of bend and stretch dollars to within an inch of non-compliance to make it work for our priority. So I will leave you with that thought as well. But those communities that I mentioned, those really savvy ones, they tend to have a community master plan that they're just going to be plugging resources into an existing plan. And I don't think that Mansfield or Richland County has a master community plan. And that's okay. A lot of places don't, but now it is time to do some planning. So what we have seen time and time again is that those places that have said, these are our priorities, these are the milestones that we are going to try to achieve to get to that goal, those are the places that really start to figure out, like I said, sort of how to use the money in a way that make it work, but also the ones that are blocking and tackling their way to success. So Hamilton, Ohio, we love those folks. They have an amazing turnaround story. Hamilton's down near Cincinnati. It's another legacy city, just a little bit larger than Mansfield. In 2009, the Obama stimulus dollars, they used those dollars to kickstart a number of key community projects to really catalyze change in the city. Additional unexpected federal and state dollars through the years then went into further supporting community priorities such as reactivating their downtown riverfront, I should say, and their downtown. And so as a result, they now have a beautiful amphitheater. They have a massive sports complex, which is going to be a regional economic driver. They have an improved access to the regional bike path. Part of their downtown prior to the 2009 stimulus dollars was 95% vacant. Today it's 95% occupied. And all of these successes are because they said back in 2008, 2009, we have got to reactivate our waterfront. We have got to turn around downtown, and we are going to do everything that we need to accomplish those ends. And we can see it in the data. You can feel it qualitatively. Hamilton is a stronger city than it was 20 years ago. And we very much attribute it to the planning and, again, sort of the block and tackling through individual projects that are all in service of these goals of reactivating the waterfront and downtown. So I guess what I'm saying right now is take 2, 3, 4 months to plan. You don't have 18 months to do a master plan. I know that. I'm not asking you to do that, but I am saying go ahead and take 3 or 4 months right now, right? If you don't have to have that money encumbered till the end of 2024, it is worth the time today to make the investments in time and planning and community input gathering to really identify what are the investments that can mutually support each other and produce greater results. Then a collection of really good projects that just really don't kind of have much to do with each other and just kind of don't add up. So I do want to note, this I think is probably the most important part, or at least one of the key things I want to kind of underscore is that the planning process needs to have a range of perspectives, right? Businesses, nonprofits, residents, but also key representatives from the Black, Asian, and Hispanic communities. And they need to be in these conversations and given the space to provide their perspectives. These communities have been hit hard by COVID, and they may see opportunities and challenges to economic and health recovery that just may not be immediately apparent to white participants. So really encouraging you to take the time to do that outreach to really make this a full community plan. The other thing about planning today is that it's going to not only help you be strategic, right? Making sure that projects are actually in alignment with each other towards a clearly defined goal, but it's going to help you find other money, right? So I love this picture, which someone will have to tell me exactly when this was taken. It's from a personal picture I took, I think in 2009 or 2012. The point is, the Renaissance does not look like this at all right now, right? And what this tells me is that, like, you all can plan, you all can attract dollars to achieve community visions. Like, what is going on in the Renaissance block these days is amazing, right? So I just want to underscore that, that there are other dollars that often will be attracted to a clear plan. The thing I do want to say too, and I know the commissioners and mayors and city council members already know this, but it's worth restating that the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, had other pots of dollars available beyond the local allocation, which is really what I've been talking about tonight, right? So depending on your priority, projects or programs or initiatives may be eligible for those other dollars, which would then let you reserve your local allocation to stretch it farther, right? So you may want to look into the Child Care Stabilization Fund, the Economic Development Administration's Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, the Shuttered Venues Fund. The point is that there are other ARPA dollars that it is worth your while trying to go after, again, in order to stretch the local allocation. In Sandusky, a few years ago, the city released a vision plan for itself. And this was really driven by local government officials, the city manager up there. And they said, we are going to prioritize our waterfront here on Lake Erie, and we are going to prioritize our downtown, which is immediately adjacent. And as a result, there has been a lot of new private housing and commercial development in downtown and along the waterfront because developers knew the city was very serious about these locations. The city, for example, actually moved its city hall into downtown. But anyway, the point is the city also worked hard to get other competitive dollars through federal and state grants to, again, kind of help build out this entire area, the waterfront and downtown, which gave confidence to private investments, but also philanthropic dollars and nonprofits working in the area that their investments were going to bring benefits and return, have good returns. So planning is going to help you find other dollars, I guess, is sort of what I want to underscore here, that it is worth the time to put in now because there's multiple benefits here. I will say that when plans are firm, communicate your priorities, right? I will totally acknowledge that residents may grumble that they may not think these are the right priorities, and I know that that's going to happen, and I'm sorry that unfortunately I think happens for every local official, and so I want to acknowledge right now that you are always sort of open to criticism, and praise is always less than it should be because we know you have a really hard job. But I will say that if you communicate your priorities early on, consistently and clearly, it's going to make your jobs easier going forward, right? Everyone knows what the priorities are. It brings transparency to the decision-making process. It also helps you prevent relitigating these priorities in every council meeting, frankly, right? You say, look, we put we had a public forum about our priorities. We've talked about this through the Richland Source and other forums, right? These are the community priorities and these are the reasons why. And so we are, Citizen Q, we understand that you think is a great concern. We have to deprioritize it now, but we are going to hold on to this in the future. Again, communicating those priorities is just going to build confidence, but also really help you stay the course on what the community priorities are. All right, 2 more quick suggestions because really I think we're here for the conversation and less so about just me yapping at you. But the first thing I want you to consider, and this comment really is for those of you in the city of Mansfield, is that the qualified census tracts that you have gives you a lot more flexibility with the ARPA dollars. And unfortunately, or fortunately, anyway, the fact is there are no other qualified census tracts in Richland County. And so the ARPA dollars basically say, you can only do certain things with our dollars in all geographies. In qualified census tracts, there's more flexibility. And that really is because the ARPA rules acknowledge that these communities were already struggling prior to the pandemic, that COVID has further deepened the long-term challenges in these neighborhoods, and that tailoring local solutions are going to have to be creative, that local leaders may require nimbleness that the federal government can't always anticipate. And so they are saying straight off, we're going to give you flexibility to be creative, particularly in these census tracts. I would be curious if we could do a quick poll right now of who all on the webinar actually lives in one of these census tracts. And so I think Brittany's going to pop that up there. Again, I actually can't see it, but maybe Brittany will tell me here in a minute. My guess is that there's fewer people on the webinar that live in the purple areas than without. And that's fine, that's understandable. I just am raising this to say that real authentic outreach to leaders within the purple area may result in priorities that look a little different than what has been recorded so far in the chat. And that's okay. That's fine. This is what we are right now, just collecting ideas and temperature taking, but did want to just acknowledge that the needs that may emerge through conversation for the qualified census tract residents may look a little different than what has already sort of emerged in the chat today. The other thing I'm going to leave you with before a final word of caution is that please start getting ready to invest in self-sustaining programs. So experts are still seeking clarity from Treasury on whether or not revolving loan funds, gap financing funds, other risk mitigating tools like loan loss reserves, whether those are eligible uses. However, observers do think those programs are going to be eligible and are basically waiting for the next round of rule clarification to confirm that. That's good because these types of programs are so powerful. We've seen them work so well in legacy cities across the country. And so this is a great opportunity to seed, basically set up the seed funding for tools like this. So let me tell you just sort of two quick stories to sort of illuminate the value of a revolving loan fund or another self-sustaining program. So in the 2009 stimulus dollars, there was a program through the Department of Energy that gave communities dollars to help industrial and commercial buildings become more energy efficient. So in Cincinnati, area localities pooled their funds. They created a nonprofit that was new. The new nonprofit gave out grants to commercial and industrial building owners. They offered homeowners $500 credits for energy efficient appliances. It was great, right? However, 11 years later, there is only 10% of the staff existing today compared to sort of at its height. The nonprofit continually is scrabbling for replacement dollars. And frankly, it's just a shell of what it was. In contrast, Toledo and its neighbors also pooled their money. So very much like Cincinnati, the Cincinnati area, they gave that money to the Port Authority, an existing entity. The Port Authority then used those funds to create a low-cost financing program. The borrowing rates are competitive. Businesses have up to 15 years to pay back the loan. The loans are structured so that the savings for the energy efficiencies really pay back the loan. So from a business perspective, it doesn't actually feel like additional money on the debt. Of course, obviously it is, but it feels very low risk to the business. And they have done this long enough now that they are now financing loans anywhere from $25,000 to $10 million. The loan loss reserve on that is a lot, right? So at this point, Toledo region, which is smaller than Cincinnati, has probably done as many or more buildings as Cincinnati, but also has this huge pool of money that they are now using to continue this program basically into perpetuity. So we think this is a great tool. Another example of a self-sustaining fund that's maybe not like $100 million bajillion dollars, but $5 or $10 million, actually $30 or $40 million, comes from Hamilton, Springfield, Piqua. They all have basically revolving loan funds that are helping with downtown redevelopment. And again, they are basically offering very competitive, very risk tolerant, very patient dollars to developers and building owners who want to revitalize their downtown buildings which otherwise cannot get traditional credit because on paper they just look too risky, right? And so this self-sustaining fund, it's called the Core Fund in Hamilton, Springford and Springfield, and Piqua. These funds are through very, deliberate, intentional investments, really helping to transform downtown building by building. So start thinking about how you can stretch the ARPA dollars to offer favorable financing or in conjunction with grants. My final word of caution is just to avoid projects that aren't financially sustainable, right? So we are hearing occasionally of communities that are like, yes, it's time to whatever huge capital improvement project, which sounds great, but we do worry about, the long-term maintenance costs that may not be fully anticipated or sort of unclear where those dollars are going to come from. We're also starting to hear a little bit of programs that are going to require staff salary that we don't think the programs may necessarily wind down at the end of the ARPA dollars. And so just sort of cautioning that if you are going to make those types of investments, that there is a clear plan for after the ARPA dollars go away to how to maintain maintain that program, sort of the Cincinnati question. So I know that was a lot to cover, but the main takeaways: be strategic, invest in these projects that are going to build on each other, invest in projects that are going to support community priorities, make sure you're getting community input, think about projects that stabilize and invest. And you may want to just sort of straight off the bat, sort of decide a certain percentage is going to go to stabilization and a certain percentage towards investment, and take the time to plan, right? It is going to be worth your while to put in a few months of planning today for the long-term benefit of these dollars, and make sure you're communicating these priorities so that all community members understand and can share in and contribute to those successes. So I am going to stop sharing now. I look forward to seeing what's in the chat, but more importantly, look forward to the conversation we're going to have here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. So the next portion, the next like 20 minutes or so of our conversation here is going to be answering your questions. So don't forget to use the Ask a Question feature or put it in the chat. I will see it. I can answer, or I can get these questions answered. So one thing that came up a little earlier is something that maybe Brady or Jody can answer. Just to clarify and give a little bit more context about the Mansfield Rising Plan. Lee Peters asked, does the Mansfield Rising Plan cover the entire city or just downtown?
Three of us could take it, but it's really focused on our central business district, which would be 6th Street to 1st Street going north and south, and then Bowman to Adams going east and west. There are other projects that are happening, but we want to be very, very focused on opportunities to grow the central business district. Great,
thank you, Brady. This next question is for Allison. It's from Jodica Shetty. She's from the Richland County Regional Planning Commission. Allison, what would be your recommendation for a successful process to assess and address the housing need? And how can ARPA be leveraged for that?
Hi, Jodica. It's good to hear from you again. This is the $1 million question that all the small legacy cities in the state are asking, actually small, medium, and large. So, I mean, some cities have been doing housing needs assessment plans, and so they have a framework that they're going to plug the money into. Places like, and there's many places like Mansfield and Richland County that don't necessarily have those types of assessments. I will say that based on my own knowledge of Mansfield and then other places. So on these revolving loan funds, if there are ways to provide support to homeowners for homeowner repair, right? So you want to maintain generational wealth by keeping people in their homes, homeowners in their homes. So either through zero interest loans or grants, right? That's a possibility. Making sure you're very strategic about the neighborhoods that you are going to be targeting. So concentrating resources in order to stabilize and then tip back into health certain neighborhoods, and being very clear and communicating why you're choosing this neighborhood today and where future neighborhoods might get attention in the future. The other thing I would say too is that you'll want to talk to others who are already locally working in the housing world, right? So my guess is that this has been an ongoing conversation and that some people already have some ideas about what the greatest priorities for housing are. So that's briefly my answer, but happy to talk more, offline or later on.
Great, thank you, Allison. I have another question for you. This one comes from Carl Hunnell. He's one of our reporters. So this is his way of reporting. But we have Allison, the construction of a dry dam in the city of Mansfield to protect the floodplain that exists on the north side is something that's been proposed. The estimated cost is $15 million. It would benefit current businesses and residents on the north end and allow for economic expansion in an area that sees very little due to frequent flooding. How would you value that for potential use of some ARPA funding?
So not to cop out, but I would say, is this a community priority, right? Like, I am no longer a resident of Mansfield, so I feel like I'm not totally in a position to say do this or do that. Like I might be, as a resident of Columbus, able to provide my opinion. I would say though that, you know, a process where the benefits and challenges, right, the pros and cons are weighed out in a community setting where other leaders are around the table, where you might have to do some horse trading among competing priorities, right? Like, I think that is going to be the best way to decide if this rises to the top or not. The other thing I would say too on that particular issue is that I think that there are other dollars available through other sources, right, at the state and federal level. So again, like taking the time to just kind of scanning what are the opportunities out there through Ohio EPA or some other sources I can talk about offline. Like, this is a perfect example where I think there are other dollars that you might want to pursue to reserve that local allocation for other items that are just not going to get as well funded.
Great. We have a question specifically about the money coming from Terry Carter. Are these funds able to earn interest while they're waiting to be encumbered?
I don't know. So I can tell you how to spend your money wisely, but there are some details that I am less familiar with. But Jody might know, or the commissioners or mayors may know, who are also on this call.
I saw that question pop up and I was trying to look the answer up. I know I read something about it, but I definitely don't want to say for sure because I'm not sure. We will get that answer to you, Terry.
I was just going to say that.
Mm-hmm.
I will say if any of our elected officials know, feel free to chime in our chat. That would be super helpful. Another question related to specifically these funds. For Allison, were you surprised by the Treasury guidance? And what relationship do you think that may have to the infrastructure bill that's currently working its way through Congress?
That's a great question. So before the rules were released, I think sort of collectively everyone across the country was like, free money, we can't wait to spend it, right? And then the rules came out and it was like, oh, bummer. Like there's some prescriptions to it that make it a little more limited. That said, infrastructure is an eligible use under the Arpa dollars. We are encouraging communities to think wisely about infrastructure investments, which otherwise might be eligible under the Job Acts or the potential upcoming infrastructure bill. I will say that Secretary Buttigieg, so the Secretary of Department of Transportation, has been very clear from day one that he wants to invest in multimodal infrastructure, right? So bike lanes, transit, fix it first, limit expansion. I mean, we'll see if that actually plays out. But so I would say one thing that we are thinking about and trying to encourage communities to think about is if there are, well, let me back up. So I will say Ohio, for a multitude of reasons we're not going to get into right now, is not very good at those projects, right? Like we just don't have the experience that the East Coast has on those types of projects. And so I would say you might want to think about using some of your ARPA dollars today to pilot a safe routes to school route, right? To pilot a bike lane in a key area so that when the Jobs Act money becomes available, if it does, this is infrastructure dollars, right? You can point to a project that has succeeded and that you want to expand, that you locally understand sort of how to kind of work the system a little bit, right? Like how to apply for that kind of project. I'll just sort of anecdotally say, I have spent some time in Massachusetts, which if you take Boston out is actually a lot like Ohio with a lot of legacy cities, But they have rail everywhere, and they have lots of plans for rail everywhere. And if we're not careful, they're going to just like take all the money, right, from the Jobs Act and like build all their rail lines. And I'm not making a statement about Ohio's decisions around Amtrak or not. I'm just saying that we are going to be less competitive on projects that would be available through the Jobs Act dollars if we don't start practicing on how to create the projects that I think are going to be prioritized by this federal administration.
Great answer. Thank you. I have a question here from Brian White. We talked a lot about strategic planning. Make sure you have a plan. Make sure you communicate that plan. Can ARPA dollars be used for strategic planning?
Yeah, so not as much as we'd like them to be. And one thing that we, wearing our state advocacy hat, are trying to encourage the state to do is allocate its dollars for planning, right? And if they feel like they can't use their ARPA dollars for that, to use other dollars. And when opportunity zones were hot a few years ago, we were part of many voices that were saying, hey, Governor, like, we need to help communities plan, right? Like, we need to give them resources so that they can hire the consultants to learn how to do this so that they can do it themselves in the future. That ultimately really didn't happen. We do hope, though, that this time around we're more successful in convincing the state to do that. I forget what the formula is. I know at least in like the Housing Assistance Fund, which is going to provide money to the housing authorities to create more affordable housing around the state, like 10% of those dollars can be used for planning purposes. So, you know, it's a small sliver, but the point is we wish there were more dollars available for planning. And I don't think that there are sufficient dollars.
I have a question here from Norm Edmiston. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, but Norm wants to know if there are desirable ARPA fund requests that are not eligible and Mansfield could pay for them. Could the city fund these in exchange for using ARPA money for projects that are eligible?
So I think what the question is, like, can you shift money around on your balance sheet so that kind of unrestricted dollars paid for high priorities while the ARPA dollars pay for sort of eligible uses? Yeah, I mean, I think some communities are thinking about sort of rearranging their first responders budget because that is an eligible response in ARPA, so that they can use some of those dollars they would otherwise allocate out of their general revenue fund for other priorities. Tiffin, for example, I think maybe doing that in order to have their pool open all year, or not all year, all summer for free. Right. So they've said this is a priority and that they were going to make it happen through general revenue funds. And I think behind the scenes they're sort of kind of tinkering with the accounting. So yeah, to the broader point that I made about sort of like use your money wisely. I mean, I was mostly talking specifically about ARPA dollars, but think about the whole budget sheet, right? Like, think about your all the money that you have at hand, and what is the most flexible and what is the most restrictive, and plug those dollars in where they need to, so that you continually sort of allow the least restrictive dollars to go to the most innovative, hardest to fund projects.
Makes sense. I have a two-part question here from Stephen Strickling, so we're going to take these one at a time. First question being, how are other cities addressing public safety, specifically the hiring and retention of safety forces and replacement of aging infrastructure?
So the safety forces, yeah, I think a lot of cities are planning to use a portion of their ARPA dollars to continue their safety forces, first responders, again, because it's an eligible use. And again, sort of back to that previous question, right? And I think they're going to kind of play around with their balance sheets to make that work. On the aging infrastructure, so ARPA is very, very clear that lead abatement and sewer water improvements are eligible uses. And I will say, I don't think your water plants are failing like they are elsewhere in the state. If they are, you may want to start using your ARPA dollars to replace those, and then again try to attract other dollars or find other dollars. But ARPA is very clear, especially the lead, making lead safe investments, right? So the water lines to houses, the water lines through the city are an eligible use. Cleveland will be prioritizing a lot of ARPA dollars for that priority because lead is such a concern in that city.
Yes, very much so. And then kind of a follow-up to that. What should the ratio be for internal city infrastructure versus other community projects that might also have access to other funding, like things like the CARES funding, PPP, small business grants and loans under the ARPA, and other aspects other than the state and local funds?
Wait, can you ask the first part again? Sorry,
Yes.
It's been a long day here.
What should the ratio be for
Okay.
internal city infrastructure versus other community projects that might also have access to other funding?
Gotcha. So that's hard to say just because I'm not familiar with your budget. Even if I were, I probably wouldn't provide an official recommendation. I will say just sort of, I will say this is advice that we give all legacy cities, that when you have money, you want to get to the low-hanging fruit that can demonstrate visible success early on, right? To build confidence, momentum, so that you can tackle the harder, maybe less visible projects. So that means if you need to spend 10% of your dollars to an emergency rental assistance program, do that because there's lots of benefits to that. But then if you also need to spend, 1 or 2% of your money to completely rewire all the administrative buildings, right, that the city owns so that there's broadband access, like that may be a priority, and that is something that you'll want to pursue. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, you're going to want to lay out all the needs and challenges, but also opportunities and benefits, and really kind of align them and figure out what is highest priority, what's not. But again, sort of keeping in mind some of these items that I've talked about earlier.
Great. I want to go back. There was one thing that Jodica also asked, and Jodica, if you're still here and you want to kind of clarify this in the chat, that'd be great. But you asked about addressing broadband as a mostly private enterprise. Not quite sure what that meant, but I'm wondering if that means if you're asking about using ARPA funds for broadband. And so I'm going to ask, like, is that a thing that we could do using ARPA funds?
Yeah. So what I think Jodica's asking is, my guess is she's asking, are there ways to incent basically private companies to put in the broadband that they should be putting in instead of using the ARPA dollars? And so the state has just passed a bill that's going to basically subsidize the expansion of broadband into hard to reach areas, particularly Appalachia. But I imagine rural parts of the state, such as the more rural parts of Richland County, will be eligible for those. Basically, they're basically matching dollars or subsidies. So yeah, I think the ARPA dollars could be, your local allocations could and should be used in that way as well. Broadband at this point is an essential utility on par with water and electricity, right? And so, like, I think as a community, you need to just say, like, this is a priority for us to be competitive and to ensure that our citizens are well served. And we'll get to that, you will achieve broadband distribution in any way possible, right? So if it's direct investments and it's city owned, or if you're attracting private enterprise to put it in and providing the incentives to do so, I think that is a worthy investment.
Speaking of worthy investments, we're asking on behalf of Deanna West Torrance, who's founder of NECIC here, is sustainable urban agriculture something that oh my goodness. Let me start over. Is sustainable urban agriculture something that ARPA dollars could fund?
Deanna, I'm glad you're here. You all, Deanna's doing great work on the north side and has been for a long, long time. I knew her when I lived in Mansfield in 2005. So she's been doing great work there. Because your service area mostly falls or entirely falls in that qualified census tract, I imagine that it would be. I will get back to you, though, to confirm, but I imagine that would be an eligible expense.
All right, guys. Well, I'm doing a last call because we've gotten to all the questions. So speak now or forever hold your peace, because otherwise we're going to wrap. So I'll give you about 10 seconds. Okay. I think we're good. I will talk more about ways to connect with these guys in a minute if you think of anything afterwards. But for now, I'm going to pass this off to Jody so she can wrap us up here.
Great. Thanks, Brittany. And thanks, Allison, and to everyone for the lively chat. I appreciated following along. There was a lot of great ideas that are being shared. And as we've kind of said all night, this is really just the beginning. And there'll be lots more ideas thrown out and all of that. As we've said at the beginning, the money that is coming into Richland County, and I know we've got friends in Ashland County and Knox County with us for all three counties. This is really generational money, as Brady said, and it's a great opportunity. For Richland County in particular, the Richland County Foundation, the Chamber and RCDG and the Source, we would like to propose taking Allison up on one of her suggestions, which is creating a plan and identifying priorities that can help our community spend this money and invest it really for our future. We're proposing to further engage GOPC to guide 2 concurrent work groups. Now, they would be primarily focused, one for the county, Richland County, and one for the city of Mansfield, since that is where the 2 most sizable investments are happening or dollars are going. This would be a process that would provide a list of potential project recommendations, identifying those priorities that Allison talked about, things helping us discover projects that might be sitting out there or that are already being talked about that would fit within the guidelines. Also, receiving public input would be a key part of this process. We've had a great start on that tonight, but we know there's a lot more that we can gather. We also want to look at other funding sources to make sure that we're leveraging the money that we have to make it go as far as possible. And that could come from other public sources at the federal level, the state level, certainly private dollars and other opportunities. And right now, there really are probably more opportunities than I certainly have ever seen in my career. So it's hard to keep up with everything that's happening. And finally, of course, conducting further input sessions with our elected officials and our community leaders. So ultimately, the choice is going to be in the hands of our elected officials as you make these decisions. But we feel that this process would give you some thoughtful recommendations that will help our communities to take advantage of this unique opportunity. And certainly for the communities, outside of Mansfield, you have your own pots of dollars, but also potential projects that could help you in your community could come from the county. So we would absolutely want you to be an active part of the county's process. We're going to follow up with you over the next couple weeks to give you some more details and answer questions that you have. Of course, in the meantime, you can reach out to Brady, Jay, or myself. You know how to reach us. And I think our biggest thing is just that we want to reiterate to you, we want to be partners. All of our organizations do. With you, we want to take advantage of this opportunity and really help move our community forward. I personally feel that we are really well positioned right now as a community to take advantage because so many of us work together day in and day out. So I think almost at this point, unfortunately, we probably take that for granted sometimes, but I think Allison can attest to other communities that is not the case where, imagine this opportunity that we have right now and we're just having to knock on each other's doors and introduce ourselves or get over things that, people are mad about. And we really don't have that. And that's a real great opportunity for us. So we're really, really optimistic. Truly, you know what? We've been through a ton this last year. Someday we'll unpack that really. We're still kind of in that mode of survival and getting through it. But I think I speak for all of us when I say we believe strongly that bright days are ahead for our communities. And we really look forward to working with you to forge ahead. Jay, I'm going to hand it over to you to close out.
Thanks, Jody. And I'll keep it brief. Just thank you, everyone, for sharing your evening with us. Over 100 people joined us, and who knew, seriously, who knew the ins and outs of local government could be this interesting? On behalf of everyone at Source Media, the Richland County Foundation, and the Chamber, thank you for your time and your commitment to your communities. Part of the job of local news is to inform, engage, and contribute to the conversation. That's what this was all about tonight. A special thanks to all of our elected officials and policymakers that took the time out to join us tonight and listen to our community and spend some time with Allison and the folks at Gopc. There's great representation there, not only from Richland County, but from our friends in Knox, Ashland, and Crawford County. And as Jody said, brighter days are ahead. Have a lovely evening. Take care of each other. And Brittany, can you just kind of walk us through any final housekeeping before we let everybody go?
Absolutely. I swear I'm not going to take any more time. So thank you again to everyone. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our attendees. Couple housekeeping things. Number one, this link that you guys followed to come to this event will remain live after this. So if anybody wants to come back and watch this rebroadcast, this is where you do that. The chat will also remain live. So if you want to scroll back up and go back and read all of the great links that people were sharing and you want to read that, this will also be live. The green follow button at the top of your screen, if you want to click that and keep up to date with any more crowdcasts, things like this that the Richland Source and the Source team might do, please do that. Most importantly, though, I'm going to call your attention to the green button at the bottom of the screen that says, "Let's keep talking." If you love what you heard tonight, if you want to learn more information, if you want to get in touch with Allison, if you want to get in touch with anybody you see here on the screen, please click that link. We want to know if you would like to continue this conversation about how to invest in your community. What are the next steps that you should take? We want to hear from you. So if you like what you've heard, please click that "Let's Keep Talking" button. We want to hear from you. Thank you again, everybody, for this wonderful conversation, and have a great rest of your evening.